Well, welcome back. Welcome to your second week of graduate school at Belhaven University here in the School of Business. This week this lecture, we're going to review a little bit about what we did last week, introduce you into writing your first paper, and then discuss a few other nuances about writing and leadership. So let's get started, shall we? I hope your first week was good. I hope you weren't overwhelmed by everything. Just remember, it's just like learning any kind of new skill. You've got to practice it. The more you consistently you practice and engage with it, the easier and better it will get for you. Okay. Now, by the end of this unit, this week, you should be able to do several things. You should actually be able to use that APA you've been reading about to write a short paper. You should be able to differentiate between scholarly and non-scholarly sources. We talked about that last week. Okay. If you need to, go back and look at that video from last week and look at the other sources that you were provided to learn about that. Now, this week we're going to talk about something very serious called plagiarism, and we're going to talk about plagiarism and why it's important. I'm going to guide you to some resources that'll help you avoid it. Okay? And then recognize the unique aspects of a graduate education. As you get into it, I think the idea should be dawning on you that this is a different experience than undergrad. And the reason maybe it feels that way is because it is. Okay. So let's review a little bit about what we talked about last week. APA reformat. It's required. All of your papers, unless instructed differently, all of your papers that you turn in will be in APA format. There's a format for how the paper is laid out, what goes where in the paper, what the margins are supposed to be, how long the pages are, the type font. All of these things are covered in APA format. We do that so that when you pick up a paper, it looks good. It looks readable. It's not scrambled. It's not hard to follow. The reader can pick it up and quickly get to reading without worrying about where things are in the paper or even trying to get through some kind of crazy font or something. Okay. The format for citations. Remember, I said you got to have sources to back you up. Well, when you write, you're going to insert into the paper what we call a citation, which tells the reader, I just made an assertion. I just said something, and here's who backs me up on it. Here's where I got that information. Okay? And then there's the references. That is the list at the end of the paper that summarizes all those sources that you cited. And by the way, I'm going to point out something right here that we sometimes forget in APA. If you have a source on your reference list, it must be cited somewhere in the paper. Conversely, anything that's cited on the paper must be on the reference list as well. There should be a match. You shouldn't have a source cited that doesn't appear on the reference list, that you didn't list that source, or vice versa. And everything on your reference list should appear somewhere in that paper. Okay. So let's cement that idea real quick. But how you format those are important. Now, you say, well, why is that important, the format for a reference? Well, I'll tell you why. Many of us, including me, when I pick up a paper that's an academic paper that somebody's read, or a research paper, or a journal in one of these peer-reviewed documents, I really don't dive into the article itself. I will quickly look at the abstract, which is a summary of the article or summary of the paper. I'll look at the title, and then I'll quickly turn to the back pages to start looking at the reference list. Now, if you format things correctly in APA, I can tell visually, without having to read all the detail in that list, I can tell the kind of sources you used. I can tell whether they were books, whether they were recent journals or very old sources. I can tell, basically, I can see how current your research is. I can tell if they were books, journals, magazines, websites. It'll tell me the sources of those documents, or the general nature of those documents, without having to read them in detail. So I get a very good picture about the quality of research that one did in the paper by just looking at the reference list. The other thing it will do, it allows me as a reader to go to that reference as well. If I read something in a paper you wrote and I said, that's very interesting, I'd like to read that source that my students cited or that a writer cited. I can find it on that reference list, and all of the information that I need is properly there, so I can look that source up myself. Adds more credibility to what you're doing, and it expands the scholarly horizon. It shares knowledge with each other that way. Remember that we have scholarly and non-scholarly sources. Scholarly are peer-reviewed, credentialed writers. Those writers have credentials in that field that they are writing. They're citing their sources, and it's written to advance the field of learning. Non-scholarly sources doesn't mean you can't use them, just recognize them for what they are. They're not peer-reviewed. The writer may or may not be credentialed. So don't use a non-scholarly article where you really need the support of somebody who's credentialed. And it's generally information for a broader audience, not just the people in that field that the paper is written for. Okay. This week, you're going to take another dive into the long view. And this is, once again, is about leading. I hope by now you're seeing maybe a different definition of leadership. I provided a definition of leadership as most of us look at leadership in this modern era. And I provided from a book by a man named James Hunter. The name of the book is The Servant. And actually, at the end of these lectures, you can see a reference where you can actually go to find that book yourself. It's a great little book to read about leadership. Won't take you long to read it. I highly recommend it. But in that book, Hunter says, leadership is the skill of influencing people to work enthusiastically toward goals identified as being for the common good. Okay. Notice what it says. Leadership is about influence. Now, you've probably gotten the idea, and it's really easy to get this idea in popular culture today, that leadership is about making people do things. Well, no, leadership is a skill about influencing people to do things. You can force people to do things, and for a while you'll get things done, but that's not what we call leadership. We call that making people do things. Okay. Leadership is focused on other people, not on yourself. Leadership, is we like to practice it now, and as is generally taught now from authorities, is the idea that it's not focused on others. It's not focused on yourself. It's focused on helping others reach their goals, helping the organization reach its goals through the people in the organization, not just glorifying the leader himself or herself. And leadership is not about being a showman. You can choose. Do you want to be a showman or do you want to be a statesman? And that's a point that Dr. Parrott brings out in chapter 2 of the long view. You want to be a showman, you want to be a statesman. One focuses on himself, the other one focuses on the organization and the people in it and the goals that organization wants to apply. So keep this little slide here in mind when you're reading chapter 2 of the long view, and keep this as part of your context. And really, if you've never thought about what leading is and about what leadership is, let this challenge you a little bit. I like this this quote from Dr. Parrott in chapter 3 of the long view. Says, giving credit never hurts a leader in the long run, but hoarding credit always does. I worked with a leader once who made an impression on me as a young man. And he said, you would be surprised how much we could get done if no one cared about who got the credit. And that's very much like what Dr. Parrott just said there. Chapter 3 of the long view is going to challenge you to build others up, not turn the spotlight on yourself. Okay. We call that building credit accounts. I've had another colleague used to call it building credibility of accounts, or building trust accounts, where people build up trust in you because they know you're not focusing on themselves or on yourself. You're focusing on them. You're communicating like a leader. You're building other people up, and they begin to trust you and actually want you to lead them. And you'll begin to see how giving away credit builds trust and builds your ability to lead more effectively. Chapter 4 of the Law of You that you'll read this week focuses on vulnerability and humility. They are not the same thing. Vulnerability involves being willing to share about yourself, and being honest enough with people to say, I can't control the outcome here. Many times we're tempted to think that leaders can control outcomes and have the ultimate outcome of what they're doing totally in their hand, and that leaders are possessed of some kind of supernatural ability to see the future. Sometimes they are more visionary, but a good leader will always admit he or she cannot control everything. There's only so many things that the leader can control. Humility involves the ability to accept the truth about yourself. Learning from mistakes, which we all make, even as leaders, and acknowledging errors. We're all going to make errors. We have to correct those errors. We have to move on. We have to learn from them and learn not to make them. The chapter 4 deals with this. I like the recent definition I heard. It says, humility is not thinking less of yourself. It's thinking less about yourself, or thinking about yourself less. So once again, we get back to that idea in leadership, that leadership is about focusing on other people and influencing them to do the task at hand. So let's take a little time as you're reading through this and thinking about your growth as a leader. Once you have this master's degree, you probably will be looked at as a leader, and you will be influencing other people. So think about your vulnerability and humility, and how that plays into how you will lead. Chapter 5 of the Law of You deals with learning from what happens. Winston Churchill once said that in our lives, we often trip over the truth and then manage to get up, dust ourselves off, and walk on as if nothing ever happened. Well, and that's what this chapter 5 of the Law of You is about. It's learning from what happens to you. When something happens to you, when you trip over something, learn from it. Learn why you trip. Learn a lesson. Be deliberate. Look for ways to learn from what's going on around you and what happens to you, and work on improving your relationships. Because as a leader, you are, like it or not, a leader is in a relationship with the people that one leads. Okay. There is a relationship there. So you definitely want to work on building and improving that relationship, especially if you want to be influential with people. Let's move on from the long view, and let's circle back to how graduate education is different. In last week's lecture, you heard me say that graduate education is very different than undergraduate education. In undergraduate education, you learned a lot of stuff. Okay. You concentrated on learning facts. You're learning basic skills. That was where, when you get right down to it, there was some learning of why, but most of your undergraduate education was on learning facts and skills. Okay. As a graduate, as a person pursuing a master's degree, you will learn to apply those facts that you had as an undergraduate. You'll learn to analyze them. You'll create the new things from them. Okay. It's not just learning more stuff. Okay. It's going to challenge you in graduate education to put two different ideas together to come up with a third new idea. It's going to challenge you to evaluate things about, was this course of action effective or not effective? Would you do this again? Yes or no? Why or why not? Okay. Is there a way we could have done this, something better? Is there a lesson we learned from this experience, or from what someone else did, or from what a business did? Or we might say, if we have a standard for how something should work, and a company did something, took some course of action, did their course of action results meet the standard? Okay. Those are the kind of questions you're going to delve into with your graduate education. You're going into a lot of why, a lot of what happens next. Yeah. And a lot of, is this effective? I should have added to this one, did it meet the standard, or how did it compare? Would be another thing to add that you're going to learn in graduate education. So yes, in every course, you're going to learn some more facts, but you're really going to be building on facts that you've already learned, either as as a graduate, or you're going to be given a new standard by which you can evaluate some things you learned as an undergrad. Now let's talk about being successful. You want to be successful in graduate education, and we at Belhaven University, your faculty members, the dean, the vice president for academic affairs, the folks over in the library, everybody wants you to be successful. Okay. Our goal here is to garden you in, not call you out. Okay. So, but some of it still falls on your actions. Now, let's think about something. Graduate education success is not about how smart you are. Okay. It's not about your IQ. Okay. You got through an undergraduate education. You got a 4-year degree. You have an undergraduate degree. You're smart enough. If you can do that, you're probably smart enough for graduate school. Okay. Success in graduate education, especially with the master's degree, is not about how you did as an undergraduate, but it is about two things. Number one, are you organized, and can you manage your time? Okay. In many years of teaching and many years of working in the professional area, I found that graduate success is about being organized and managing your time. The people that are organized and can do things systematically and in a competent way, and that are especially good at keeping up with how many hours they spend doing things and setting aside the time to do things properly, they'll do okay. And we're going to talk about more of that in Unit 3. The other thing is carefully following directions. Most of the time, when a student gets a low grade on an assignment, in my experience, and I'm going to step out on a limb here and say this is for my colleagues that teach also. Most of the time when we have to take off a lot of points, it's because you didn't follow the directions, because the student simply did not follow the directions. Okay. If I ask you to analyze a company and tell me all about their financial structure, but you tell me all about their strategic plan instead, that may have been more interesting for you, but it wasn't what I asked for. I asked about their finances, and you told me something else about the company. Or if I asked you how what Nike's sales were, how many pairs of shoes did they sell in 2024, and you tell me about how much money they spent on marketing, well, you didn't follow the directions. Okay. So I've literally found that most students that don't do well in graduate school do two things. Number one is they don't follow directions, and they're not organized with their time. Okay. Success in a graduate program is totally about how organized you can be. So manage your time well. We're actually going to spend some time with that in Unit 3. Okay. Work with your fellow learners. One of the interesting things about adult education, teaching adults, is that adults learn from each other as much as they learn from a professor or from a book. There's one of the biggest principles of teaching adults and in graduate school is you actually can learn from your fellow learners. Even though you may be separated from them, you will probably be working in some cohorts with them along the lines and be with many of them in many classes. Get to know them as well as you can online. Work with them. You'll actually develop some teams and consistent groups that you work with and and learn from as you're going forward through your programs. The next thing is realize your professors are really trying to help you. They're not trying to hurt you, and they're not trying to run you off. They're not trying to make you fail. Now, some professors are better than others at communicating. Hey, we're human. Okay. At, at, at the professors, your instructors are human, uh, but we do want you to succeed. Uh, None of us are trying to run you off. Therefore, if you need help from the professor, ask for it and work with your professor in a courteous and respectful way. It doesn't help to be confrontational with a professor because, well, you just don't need to be. Your professor is really trying to help you. He's trying to guide you. Your professor's been further down the road than you have. So trust that, trust the system and trust your professor and reach out to them and get them to help you. And because we like to help you, we, uh, we want to help you succeed. Learn how to think critically. We're going to talk about critical thinking, down the road here. You're going to learn not to be superficial and maybe write that on a piece of paper, stick it on your wall somewhere where you study, um, and 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 remind yourself, do not be superficial. Get beyond the easy, get beyond the superficial, and get comfortable with writing a lot. You're going to write a lot in this program, but writing is wonderful. Writing helps you crystallize your thinking. Um, is Dr. John Peterson says, if you can write, if you can communicate clearly in writing, you have a real advantage over the other people you work with, because writing forces you to crystallize your ideas and communicate them clearly. And it's really a tool that you can use. The more comfortable you get with writing, the more skilled you get at it, the more skilled you will become at thinking, and the more skilled you'll become at communicating orally with the people you lead. So get comfortable with writing a lot. Okay. Your life experiences and life lessons are not a substitute for the graduate education. They're not a substitute for research, but you can sure build on them. They will give you insight into the things that you're reading and learning. Plan for your life after graduate school. You're going to think graduate school is running your life for the next 1.5 to 2 years, but it will be over someday, and you will be doing something else, and you will be employing this graduate education. So look down the road and say, how do I want to employ this? And build build the things that you can control in your graduate experience, with that in mind. Think down the road. Be ready for a heavy workload. I kind of alluded to that already. The workload is going to be heavy. There are going to be some nights. You're going to be having to say no to some things, maybe in your social life for a couple of years. You're going to have to be very selective. You're going to have to rely on family to help you out, and help maybe bear the load, because we realize as a graduate learner, you're fitting this into your life. Okay. You're fitting this into the rest of your life where you have work, you have family responsibilities, you have church or social life. There's things that you're trying to fit this into, but just realize that this is important enough that if you really want to do it well, you're going to have to shift some other things away and let other people carry some loads, but it will be over someday. It will not last forever. And learn from others. If you see somebody that's been successful, find out what they did to get that way. Now, 5 things about plagiarism. This is a good time to talk about plagiarism while you're writing that first paper. Plagiarism is serious. Okay? Plagiarism is taking ideas and words and work that someone else did and claiming it as your own. Therefore, when you plagiarize, you're telling the reader that you created something that they're reading where you really didn't. It's a lie. Okay? We don't want to lie, do we? Okay? Plagiarism is theft. When you plagiarize, you're stealing somebody else's work and not giving them credit for what they did. Um, and if you will look in the last year, there's been several there's been several very important people, very highly ranked people, some college presidents, and people others in high authoritative places were caught plagiarizing. People started looking back at things they wrote and realized these people plagiarized. They stole other people's ideas and claimed them as their own. And it did not look well for them. It did not have good outcomes for them because it's lying, it's theft. Plagiarism goes by another term called academic dishonesty. But you know what? Plagiarism is not necessary. You don't have to do it. You've got plenty of sources. Tell what your sources are. Give credit to the people that wrote it, employ their ideas, paraphrase their ideas, use them in your paper, but give credit. And, over the years, I've come to realize that plagiarism, it's a lazy behavior. Many times when we see a learner involved in plagiarism, it's not because they're not smart enough to have done the work themselves. They just got lazy and tried to take an easy way out. When plagiarism is really, really easy to avoid. And there are some resources in those academic resources in BlazeNet. Go to that academic resource page. There's a whole section of tools on plagiarism. And I want you to take a look at those. So you'll begin to recognize plagiarism when you see it. So here's some a simple chart that I put together about plagiarism. And these are some things that are common types of plagiarism. Using somebody else's words as your own. If you use somebody else's words, quote them, give them credit. Okay. Cutting and pasting. Right from somebody else's document right into yours without citing it. Yes, that's clearly plagiarism. The third was something we call self-plagiarism. It's copying from your own work as if it were new. At least a couple of things there. Number one is, if you used it in a prior paper, at least cite yourself and show that you did it. But Belhaven University takes a dim view of self-plagiarism, and it takes a dim view of just recycling other work. Certainly, as you've gone along, if you wrote a paper for a course a year ago and you want to bring it up, certainly you've learned something between now and then that gives you a new perspective on that course or on that idea. So rewrite the idea in light of what you've learned since then or in light of the new course. Don't just cut it, paste it from your old work to your new work. And believe me, we have a tool in Canvas that the instructors use and you have access to as well, called turnitin.com. It will tell us if you recycled it from another paper that you wrote. And we will, in most cases, or many cases, catch the plagiarism by using turnitin.com. It'll tell us if something has turned up in other papers. Okay. Don't use the work of another learner. Okay? Just don't. Okay. Don't use a rewriter app. Those are some apps which they can cut information from one article, paste it in there, and it will reword it. Normally, we can tell if that's been done. Most rewriter apps are crude forms of artificial intelligence that simply stick synonyms in documents, and usually, when it does so, the writing becomes very poor writing. There's some tells in there that tell us that all people did was change words, because sometimes the usage of the words just sounds funny. And it's usually the big tip off on that one. Don't use AI. Don't use artificial intelligence without attribution. As I said in the prior lesson, fine to use AI, just attribute it, cite it. Okay. And I'm copying phrases from several writers and rearrange them with a single citation. If it's coming from several writers, cite the several writers, and don't try to be falsely economical in trying to throw them all into one citation. Be very straightforward about where it came from. So now it's time to write that first paper. You've been given directions this week. Pay attention to what the instructions were and what the topic is. Review the APA rules before you start. Hey, look at that sample APA paper that's available there in BlazeNet. Replicate the example. Use it as a cookbook, as a go by, as a friend of mine used to call it. Use that thing as a go by, uh, and replicate what's there in its style and layout and reference and citation formats. Use good grammar. If you have trouble with grammar, there's a tool called Grammarly in the academic resources that will help you out. Last thing, avoid first person, I, me. If the topic of the paper is not you, you should not be using I, me, because it suggests bias. Okay. And the other thing is you're not an authority on the topic. So there are ways to get your ideas across without saying I think or I did this, but you focus on things as if you're writing as a third person. If you need to look that up, what a third person perspective is, you probably learned that in high school grammar. But use that third person perspective when writing academic papers. First person is acceptable in a reflective paper, but not other types of papers. So if the instructions say it's about you, it's okay to use first person. Otherwise, don't. So, as always, complete those reading assignments. I recommend you read everything before trying to write anything. Then complete the writing assignments and answer those discussion questions with your peers. And I think you'll have a good week. I look forward to seeing what you do this week. We look forward to reading your assignments and getting into next week's work. If you have any problems, reach out to your professor.